Paleo Runner Podcast is devoted to finding better ways to live, run, train, and eat. I'm your host, Aaron Olson. You can find more information by going to paleorunner.org. If you enjoy the show, please go to iTunes and leave a review. Search for Paleo Runner in iTunes and click ratings and reviews. You can also follow me on facebook.com/runpaleo or on Twitter @runpaleo. I wanted to take a minute to let you know about a product I've been using called 3Fuel. 3Fuel is a sports drink that gives you fat, protein, and carbohydrates to use as a fuel source. Unlike sugary sports drinks, 3Fuel gets absorbed slowly into your bloodstream to give you sustained energy throughout your workout. If you'd like to give it a try, you can get 10% off by using the coupon code 3FOLSON. Go to paleorunner.org and click 3Fuel at the top of the page. If you're listening through the podcast app on iPhone, click the link displayed on the app right now. My guest today is John Durant. John is author of the Paleo Manifesto, Ancient Wisdom for Lifelong Health. He studied evolutionary psychology at Harvard and founded Paleo NYC and Barefoot Runners NYC. He's been featured in the New York Times, the Colbert Report, and NPR. John, thanks so much for being part of the show.
Great to be here, Aaron.
John, it's great to have you on. I've really been enjoying reading your book, and the thing I liked about your book is that, aside from other paleo books, you include a lot of the lifestyle of the paleo way of living. Tell me a little bit about how you got interested in paleo. Let's just start from there.
Yeah, in terms of the book and some of the lifestyle factors, I try to encourage people to think of their life and everything in it as their habitat. And your habitat is the food that you eat and how you move and the relationships that you have and the sun and your workplace and things like that. And when you start to view your life as a habitat, you think about one of the things I encourage people to do in the book is to think about ways that they could tweak or change or alter their habitat to make it easier to thrive in a lot of different ways. So my background and my interest in this is a completely ordinary story, unfortunately, because it's far too common. I was a year out of college at my first full-time desk job. It seemed like my metabolism slowed down in a big way. My energy was spiking and crashing. I was drinking too much alcohol, not getting enough sleep. Sort of the typical work hard, play hard type of lifestyle that a lot of people have after college. And I just didn't feel very good. I mean, I put on 20 pounds or something, but that really wasn't a big deal. I could sort of stand to gain 20 pounds. For me, it was more my energy was spiking and crashing, and it wasn't just my energy, it was my mood. I would sort of swing from optimistic to pessimistic over the course of a 12-inch meatball sub from Subway. And so I just wanted to feel healthier. I didn't really have I didn't want to, fit into a bikini for swimsuit season or anything like that. And I didn't want to I'd never been on a diet before. I don't like diets. A lot of women have very negative association with diets because they've been more concerned with body image, and probably a lot of women have been on diets that haven't really worked over the long term. And then a lot of men just haven't paid any attention to their health at all, and sort of view diets as something that women do. So there's a stigma around diets, and I just didn't want to count calories or any of that nonsense. Mm-hmm. So I had studied some evolutionary psychology in college, and so when I came across an evolutionary approach, it just sort of clicked. I was like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. We should look at how we lived in the wild and integrate some of those lessons into modern life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in the beginning you mentioned that a big part of why you wanted to try something different was your moods, is that you had gone through a kind of a rough breakup, and you noticed that when you were getting more sunlight and sleeping better, your mood was just so much better, and you thought, I wonder if there's a way that I could be up all the time as far as my mood goes and just feel good all the time. And was that a big part of it as well?
It was. I mean, I felt like a different person at different points in time. I went through this breakup, and I found that if I got 8 hours of sleep, had exercise, wasn't hungover, and eating decently, things were fine. It wasn't that big of a deal. Moving on. However, if I was hungover, had gotten 6 hours of sleep, hadn't been working out, and been eating a bunch of Chinese takeout, it was like my world was coming to an end. And it was I tried to step back from it, and I just found it so strange that something as fundamental as who I am and the relationships in my life could fluctuate so much based on my health. It really made me realize that the brain doesn't just float in the ether completely independent from the rest of your body. I mean, the brain is part of your body. It controls hormones throughout the body. Everything is united. Mind and body are not separated; they're one. And so when I used to think that my body was kind of, my lack of health was dragging down my mind. And then one day I sort of flipped that equation and realized that if I took control of my health, I could actually improve my mental state. And that set me on the course to where I am today.
Okay. I really like this analogy that you use in your book about animals in captivity, and this idea that each animal is adapted to its natural habitat. And you kind of make this analogy that humans living today are really outside of their natural habitat, and that if we really want to be vibrant and healthy, we might need to start looking at things different. Tell me a little bit more about what you found by looking at animals in the zoo.
So a few years ago, this was a really fun adventure to go on. A few years ago, I saw an article about two gorillas at the Cleveland Zoo and how the zookeepers had changed their diet from a bunch of processed pet food bars called gorilla biscuits to a bunch of leafy plants and vegetables and stems and things like that, and had gotten some really great health outcomes. So I thought, oh, cool, this is right in line with the type of stuff I'm thinking about. So I called up the zoo. I got in touch with the medical staff that was in charge of this experiment, and I asked them if I could just fly to Cleveland and hang around with them for a couple days and learn about how they keep animals and captive animals healthy, and learn more about this experiment. So I went down there. It was an amazing group of women, mostly, who were working on this project. Elena Less was a PhD student at the time, and she was writing her dissertation on adiposity and obesity in captive gorillas. See, people go to the zoo and they look at the animals. What they don't often realize is that many of the animals are quite overweight, and they suffer from many of the same health problems that humans do. So dental problems are rife in zoos. Different mental or psychological problems like pacing or lethargy or what appears to be depression, also fairly common in zoos. And so when I was speaking to them, they had a very simple approach for improving the health of animals in captivity. And step one, of course, was making sure that they don't die. And modern medical technology is very good at making sure that other animals or humans don't die, right? And you go into most zoos can keep most species alive longer than they would in the wild these days. But that's mostly a factor of having enough food, not separating predators from prey, not having members of the same species wound and fight each other, and not having infectious disease. So the next step after these animals are living a long time is they start to notice all these chronic health problems, just like a lot of the chronic health problems that humans have today. So I was shocked when I learned this. Heart disease is the number one killer of male gorillas in captivity.
Wow.
It also happens to be the number one killer of human males in civilization. The types of heart disease are a little bit different, so it's not directly analogous or entirely analogous. But they basically, a lot of zookeepers do think that there's a similar type of metabolic syndrome that's going on with a lot of these zoo animals. So clearly gorillas do not eat wheat, corn, and soy made into processed pet food bars, even if they are fortified with vitamins. So they switch these gorillas over to leafy stems and things closer to what they might eat in the wild. Clearly, they weren't shipping in plants from Africa. And all these health problems go away. They lose 50 pounds. They stop regurgitating their food all the time. They stop plucking their hair. The progression of heart disease stops. So it's in some ways zoos have been leading the way in advance of human medicine, they've been leading the way at starting to treat chronic health problems through lifestyle change.
Interesting. So what did they do for those gorillas? I mean, you said that they were feeding them corn and soy. They started feeding them a more natural diet, and they stopped doing things like regurgitating their food and plucking out their hair, which would seem to be more mental issues, not just physical. And their heart health also improved.
It's all tied together. I mean, we're realizing that a lot of mental health problems are closely related to physical health, from vitamin D levels to chronic infections to exercise and things like that. So it's no surprise to me that a change in diet or lifestyle could influence mental health. So they most zoos have fed, over the last 20, 30 years, have fed these gorilla biscuits to the gorillas, and they understand. The zoos and the zookeepers understand that gorillas in the wild are not eating gorilla biscuits. What they're doing, though, the trade-off that they had been making is that if you look back at zoos over the last 100, 200 years, the foods that were fed gorillas were even worse. I mean, they would feed them meat because they didn't realize that gorillas were herbivores or herbivores plus insects. They'd look at their teeth, and this image of King Kong would come to mind. And, of course, these ruthless, aggressive animals must eat meat. But they don't. Right? And so you look at old zoo records from back in the day, and they were feeding bread to these animals and alcohol as a treat and candy, and it boggles the mind today.
Yeah.
So these gorilla biscuits were an improvement on what happened before, and were fortified with vitamins and nutrients. But then now they're taking it a step forward.
Right. John, some people who I talk to about paleo would probably be incredulous that paleo is really that powerful. I've had some health improvements, but they say, well, people are living longer than ever, and of course they have to die of something. So heart disease, if it's the number one killer, so what? You're going to die, and we keep living longer. Why would you think that improving your diet to a more ancestral diet would help? What do you say to that?
Well, look, if people are fine with their health, how they're currently eating and how they're currently living, who am I to tell them to do otherwise? So if people are fine and they like what they're doing, God bless you. Keep doing it. And we don't all have to eat the same diet. We don't all have to figure out, there's no one size fits all for everyone. That's fine. However, if somebody has a health problem that they're trying to address, maybe it's a digestive issue, maybe it's infertility, maybe it's depression, then paleo is a smart thing to experiment with. So just try and see if it works. And let that be the measure of whether you keep doing it or not, whether it delivers functional benefit for you. And as I've found as I've done paleo over the years, it's morphed, it's changed. It's not, I'm not eating the exact same way that I did when I first started paleo. I've experimented with different foods. I've found that, for example, I do fine with a certain amount of full-fat dairy. It's nutrient dense. I like it. And so I incorporate it into my diet. I'll have some heavy cream or sour cream or grass-fed butter or a little bit of no sugar added yogurt or something like that. Not every day necessarily, but on a fairly regular basis. So, at the end of the day, you have to experiment and see what works for you. Yeah,
I like that idea that you have to experiment, but sometimes experimenting can be tough, and it helps to have a template, such as something like the paleo diet, to look at. And when reading your book, I really liked how you had a very flexible approach to eating. And one thing that you mentioned is that fermented grains might be okay, dairy might be okay, and white potatoes. Tell me a little bit about how your paleo diet has evolved to include some of those foods.
Yeah, sometimes people refer to paleo 1.0, 2.0, or maybe we're on 3.0. I don't know. Things are changing quickly. The hunter-gatherers are opportunistic omnivores. They eat plants, animals, different parts of the animal, insects, amphibians, birds, eggs, honey, roots and tubers, all sorts of stuff. And so I think it's okay to maintain that mentality of being opportunistic about certain foods. What were the ones you mentioned? White potatoes.
Well, for example, white potatoes. When I originally started the paleo diet, I had read Lauren Cordain's book, and he specifically forbid white potatoes and things like dairy and even fermented. Well, he says, of course, no grains.
Right.
But I saw in your book that white potatoes might be okay and dairy. And then later on in the book, I read that fermented grains might even be okay.
Well, we first off, with fermentation, there's been a lot of cultural evolution over the last 10,000 years where different societies around the world have harnessed the power of fermentation to make foods healthier. So traditional forms of food processing can be fabulous, and if you do enjoy grains and they aren't certain grains and they aren't causing the same types of problems for you that they may for somebody else, then fermentation can be a good way to minimize the negatives and maximize the positives. So more people are talking about probiotics and gut health and the gut microbiome and the role of microorganisms in health, and fermented foods can be a great way to get some live cultures into your diet. Michael Pollan came out with his most recent book in April, and it's called Cooked. And the fourth chapter, or the fourth part of the book, is on fermentation, and it's really wonderful. The other three parts are good too, but everyone has sort of agreed that the fourth part on fermentation really shines. And I think it'd be silly to completely ignore the tradition of fermentation.
Mm-hmm. So are fermented grains something that you included in your diet?
I don't include them in my diet, partially because these days I've been so busy with getting this book done and working on the release that I haven't had time to really ferment a lot of stuff, and I haven't even been able to cook as much as I usually like to. Mm-hmm. I also find some of the traditional some of the traditional practices surrounding grains that a lot of people do in Weston Price and things like that, I find it to be very time consuming, soaking and sprouting and fermenting and those things. So at this point in my life, it's not something that I do, and those foods, the grains in particular, aren't something that I miss. So I don't include them. Okay. But I sort of wanted to take a big tent approach with my view, and didn't want to, the notion that there's one true way of eating a Paleolithic diet, that's not going to hold up over time. If people haven't realized that yet, and so I'd rather be a little bit more inclusive and not try to say, well, you're eating white potatoes, you're not paleo, or stuff like that. I think that can get a little bit silly. I think this orthodox view of a Paleolithic diet and eating the right types of food groups is a great starting point. Mm-hmm. Not everybody has to end there. Yeah. So what was the other?
Oh, well, John, I think our listeners would be really interested to hear a little bit about what you eat on a daily basis. Kind of run me through what your daily life is like as far as your eating schedule.
Yeah, so I usually don't eat breakfast. I wake up, I'm not feeling too hungry. I'll have a cup of coffee, maybe with some heavy cream or a little bit of grass-fed butter in it, and I will work until early afternoon, maybe 1 o'clock, before I'm really eating something.
Okay, John, let me stop you right there, because I've heard a lot about this, but even some people in the paleo diet, not everyone's heard of intermittent fasting. That kind of sounds like what you're doing in the morning. Tell me a little bit about the advantage to that.
Well, people these days eat so consistently. They're grazers, lots of snacking and small meals consistently throughout the day. And the sort of superficial rationale has been to eat lots of meals to keep your blood sugar up. But The eating frequency, an appropriate eating frequency sort of depends on what species you are. So if you're a gorilla, like the gorillas at the Cleveland Zoo, they need to eat all day. They are grazers. They do nibble on plants all day long, and that's what they're adapted to do. But if you're a lion, if you're a carnivore, then these guys are often eating once every 2 or 3 days, or even 4 days. And we need to start realizing that these periods of not eating or periods of hunger can be healthy for you. They can be good for you, just like being exposed to going on a run, some stressors from going on a run, or working out, or being exposed to the cold, or heat, or things like that. All these different types of stressors can result in healthier benefits, and the same is true of being hungry. So some of the benefits of intermittent fasting are you can help break sort of a sugar addiction and start helping your body shift to more of a fat-based metabolism and learn to utilize the fat on your own body more effectively. It also initiates a process called autophagy. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Lots of terms that you read and write a lot, but don't say a lot in standard conversation.
Right.
Where it's a recycling process in the cell where when protein is scarce, cells, instead of going through mitosis and dividing a lot, will recycle cellular debris in the cell. And so it's a way of repairing chromosomal damage and repairing damage to the cell. There have been interesting applications and discussions of intermittent fasting and increased longevity. Intermittent fasting is a way to deal with chronic infections. So, and then you look at all these cultures around the world, whether it's Buddhism or Judaism or Catholicism or different fasting traditions among American Indians, and you just see this practice of intermittent fasting bubble up pretty much everywhere. And so in my own life, I try to, maybe once every week and a half or so, I try to go a full 24 hours without eating. And on a fairly regular basis, I'll go 16 to 18 hours without eating. Not necessarily every day, but you have a late lunch and you eat before the sun goes down, and you're doing that without even realizing it.
Okay. So you're doing that in the morning, and you're experiencing some health benefits from that. Then you said you start your lunch or your first meal around 1 o'clock. What do you have for that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go get some sushi and some seaweed salad, or I'll go to Chipotle and get one of their salads just with the peppers and onions and guacamole, some meat and some sour cream, or I'll get a Cobb salad or something like that. So some sort of veggie with a little bit of meat on the side. I'll do that. And then dinner is sort of more of a traditional dinner where I'll probably have a side salad, a vegetable that I've cooked, and some sort of meat or fish. Okay. But sometimes in the morning, I'll have a small bowl of heavy cream with a banana cut up in it, or my go-to snack or meal replacement if I don't have time and I need to eat something is a can of sardines or a can of mackerel.
Okay.
I love that. I love that stuff. It's brain food. It's really good. You get a ton of omega-6s, you get some protein, some fat. I'm sort of moderately low carbohydrate, but not extremely low, and so mackerel and sardines are just fabulous.
Okay. It doesn't sound like you eat a lot of carbs there. How does that work with your running? Have you found it to be just fine?
It depends. I'm not doing super long runs. I mean, my runs are anywhere from 3 to 6 miles, so I'm not doing marathons or ultra marathons or anything like that. And so it's the level of carbohydrate that I'm eating. I just calibrate for how active I am. I'm pretty good at staying in sort of an aerobic mode when I'm running or barefoot running, where I'm still in fat burning mode and not switching over to anaerobic and going through tons of glycogen, depleting those stores. So, I usually will have like a sweet potato, or I found a potato chip vendor that doesn't cook in canola oil, so sometimes I'll have a few few of those.
That you got to tell me what that is, because I love potato chips, but I haven't had them for a long time.
I was just at the Ancestral Health Symposium. Oh shoot, I don't have the name on me right now.
Okay.
I'll get you the name, and you can post it in the notes of your show.
And those are cooked in like lard or something like that?
Coconut oil.
Okay.
And we also had one from another place that were cooked in lard, and just fabulous. I was a very, very happy paleo boy.
Okay, I'll put up a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah.
So you mentioned there that you do some barefoot running. How important is that to you in your exercise program? And just tell me more about how you get into that. Was that before you went paleo, or was that part of the whole package?
It was part of the whole package. It was a little after, maybe a year after I had started eating this way, or maybe even 2. And I had a knee issue when I would go running in conventional shoes, and after about a mile I would have to pull up lame. And this was very frustrating to me because I thought I'm 25 years old or whatever. I should not be pulling up lame after 1 mile of running. And I came across Vibram 5 fingers and that whole thing, started going barefoot, changed to a gentle forefoot strike with my running stride, and the knee issue went away. And then I actually just found that I enjoyed the sensation of barefoot running, particularly trail running, more than just jogging in conventional shoes. I was out in California, in Santa Cruz, visiting the CrossFit, and I was running a trail that they have out back. It's sort of they aren't big runners there, but there's this beautiful trail out behind their headquarters, and have you seen Last of the Mohicans?
Yep.
Yeah. I don't need headphones when I'm barefoot running because Last of the Mohicans is playing in my head. And it's just it's so mentally stimulating, and it feels like more of a skill than just brute conditioning. I really don't like, if people are putting in headphones or watching TV or things like that, it means that whatever they're doing isn't sufficiently mentally stimulating, and it's not challenging. It's not challenging their brain in any way. Okay. And so it probably means people are just there trying to burn calories, and right. That's not really my style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, John. One of the interesting parts of the book that I found towards one of the end chapters was you actually decided to take on this idea of actually hunting an animal yourself and going out and experiencing the whole thing, gutting it, and all that. Tell our listeners a little bit about what that was like, and have you been out hunting since?
The first time you go hunting is quite an experience. It can be challenging, though, for people who might like to learn how to hunt to actually figure out how to go do it, because so much hunting knowledge traditionally has been passed through male relatives. And so if you didn't have an uncle or a grandfather to teach you how to hunt, then you were out of luck. And in my case, neither of my grandfathers were hunters, so the information never got passed down. In a parallel way, in the female line, it used to be that knowledge of midwifery and childbearing was passed down informally, informal knowledge passed down through women, and then once you start getting to hospitals and hospital-based childbirth, that whole legacy breaks down as well. So it's sort of odd how modernity has started to has caused a lot of this traditional wisdom in the male and female domain to disappear. But I got a great book to learn how to deer hunt by a guy named Jackson Landers, and called the Beginner's Guide to Hunting Deer for Food. It's excellent. I highly recommend it. It's very clear, great charts and diagrams, and that was a good way to just familiarize myself with what was necessary, what was required. You can't read the book and go out and just be an expert hunter, but it's a good place to start. And then I went to a seminar that this guy Jackson Landers was putting on, and we got to gut and field dress a deer that had already been shot. So I was able to go through that process a little bit. And then you need to find some sort of friend. and ask around who is a hunter and say, hey, can I just come with you in September or October or whenever hunting season opens where you are? And most hunters, I've never met a hunter that wasn't welcoming of someone who wanted to learn. And find that person. They will help you figure out the right gear. They will help you navigate some of the licensing stuff. And so I went on a hunt in Michigan about 2 years ago with a family friend, and a group of guys in his family always gets together every year when deer season opens. We call it deer camp, and they set me up, and on my first day, I did end up shooting my first deer. And you can read. I'm not going to sort of go through and describe it. You can read about it in the book. It's probably a little more poetic in the book than it is here. But
well, tell me a little bit about what that. I mean, I started bow hunting about 3 years ago, and I remember the first time I shot the deer. It was just such a kind of a rush. Not like, oh, I'm so glad I killed the deer, but it was like, this is so rush. Adrenaline. Like I'm feeding my family by hunting my own food. There was just something really primal and cool about that. Did you have that experience?
I did. I absolutely did. And it's amazing how your senses come alive when you're hunting. When you have to pay attention to your scent, and you have to pay attention to the wind. And we are so visual, but deer are more scent-oriented and noise-oriented. So you have to pay attention to sound. And so everything becomes sensitized. And then there's a lot of waiting. See, I think a lot of non-hunters, they kind of envision hunting as if it were Big Buck Hunter, the video game, and there's all this shooting. Hunting is closer to bird watching than it is to paintball.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of sort of peaceful moments, highly sensitized in nature, and then boom, you see an animal. You freeze, and you're wondering if it's seen you. And then you've got to get your gun or your bow into place, and then your heart is just pounding in your head and in your ear. And your heart, a lot of hunters have made this observation. People think that their heart is beating so loud that the animal will be able to hear it. Like, how can you not hear my heart beating? And then if you're shooting a gun, the noise is so loud, and you're going to get kickback that you suddenly go from complete peacefulness to this big boom that shocks you as well. And then there's a moment where you're not quite sure whether you hit the animal or not. Did you hit it? Was it a clean shot? And I happened to drop the deer that I shot immediately, and it died, and probably about 2 seconds later it was through the spinal cord. So it's intense. It's extremely intense. But what I like about it so much is, rather than trying to disengage from where our food comes from, it's engaging and re-entering the food chain rather than it's impossible to remove ourselves from the planet. Right. From having an impact on the planet. We can try as we might to try to forget where our food comes from, but we can never actually remove our footprint from the earth. And so I think it's very important to not pretend that we can do that, and to actually re-engage with the food system and look it in the eye. Yeah. So I found it to be a very, very powerful experience. Of course, I'm not the first one to write about this. I mean, a lot of people have written about their first hunting experiences, so I'm not pretending that I had some great insight that other people didn't have as well. Right.
I like how your book incorporates the whole lifestyle, the whole paleo lifestyle. And one thing you mentioned is paleo not paleo, but the idea of like a standing desk for work. And I'm kind of interested in someone who's a writer like yourself. How does your creative process work, and is it tied into the paleo lifestyle at all? I mean, are you standing while you write? Do you do intermittent writing?
Aaron, I'm standing right now.
Oh, nice.
Stand-in for the interview.
Okay.
Well, what I've found is sometimes people will. There have been some papers published recently about how sitting can kill you, and all these metabolic processes that shut down. I used to stop burning as many calories. To be honest, that's not really what motivates me to stand up. I stand up. I try to stand up when I work. I don't do it all the time, but because I feel more assertive, I feel more active, I feel more awake, and I definitely feel more creative. I just feel more in the moment and doing what I'm doing than if I'm hunched over on the couch, falling asleep, lying there practically in the fetal position.
Right.
So if you, I've got a sidebar in my book on authors, famous authors throughout history who have written standing up, and it's actually really remarkable. Everyone from Vladimir Nabokov to Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, the poet, to Charles Dickens. The sun also rises. Hemingway. Dear Lord. Hemingway would take his typewriter and just put it on the top of a bookshelf, and he would stand on the skin of a kudu, which is sort of like an antelope in Africa. He would stand on the skin of a kudu that he had shot himself. So that's quite the locavore furniture. So
are you standing on an animal skin right now?
I am not. I figure if I'm going to stand on an animal skin, I better shoot it myself. So right. I don't have one.
Lastly, I'd like to bring up this idea of politics. I've read a lot of Steven Pinker, and I know you draw some inspiration from him. And it seems like a lot of people in the paleo movement are kind of leaning towards the libertarian slant. Is there a connection there? What have you found?
Well, first of all, Steve doesn't eat paleo, and so he's not a part of the movement in that regard. I do think you're right that there does seem to be a strong libertarian streak in paleo, CrossFit circles. I don't. But they're all different types of people. Eating a healthy diet doesn't have to be a part of someone's political ideology. What I do think there are some factors at play, though. First of all, the food movement to date, particularly the plant-based diet crowd, vegetarianism and veganism, is explicitly political, and it's heavily liberal. So I think some people who don't quite identify with that entire set of beliefs or ideology feels a little bit alienated from aspects of, say, veganism or vegetarianism. And so what I think is great about the rise of paleo is that it offers another path to conscious eating. And so I think that's one factor is that the food movement was already politicized in one direction. And a lot of libertarians are appreciative of this concept called spontaneous order, or how you can have an intelligent outcome or intelligent system, even if someone didn't explicitly plan it. There's no central planner or central designer. And libertarians often point to that in terms of the economy. But you can also look at biology and something like the human body as this brilliant product of evolution by natural selection. And there was no central designer, there was no central planner, but you can still get outcomes that are very intelligent and beautiful and incredible. So I think there's a little bit of an intellectual affinity there. But I've met all different stripes of people, from anarchists to socialists to communists to conservatives to moderates to independents to people who hate all politics, and that's fine, and that's good. So.
Yeah. Well, John, I really enjoyed your book. It's really got this inclusive approach, and you look at a lot of different aspects of life. But where can people go to find out more about you and to buy the book? What's the best way to follow you?
Well, the book is on sale in stores wherever books are sold. It's also online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple, iTunes, Google Books, other options too. I blog at huntergatherer.com, and there will also be links to find the book there. And if people do pass through New York City, then they should, on my blog, have some links to resources that they can download if they want to come barefoot running in Central Park with a group of us, or find primal paleo restaurants in New York. There are a lot of resources there. So there's lots to choose from. Oh,
great. Well, John, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thanks so much for being part of the show.
All right. Thank you, Aaron.
You've been listening to another episode of Paleo Runner Podcast. For more information, go to paleorunner.org. Thanks for listening.